in continuation with our lesson for word meaning inferences and line inferences to be done as part of our critical reading comprehension of the SATs. Let's take a look at a different type of framing of answer options. Earlier, we had taken a look at word meaning and simplified answer options. Let's see how the answer options can be camouflaged in lengthy sentences, or rather how the real answer can be camouflaged in lengthy sentences, a lot of which are generalities and not specifically oriented towards interpreting that particular line that we are supposed to interpret. Now, very often line references and word references within the question itself, they give us a line reference. Now, say for example, this particular thing, suppose, let's assume that this is a sentence which is taken from a passage. Let's say this sentence is in line 30. So it says, a tantalizing paradox peers out from every basic physics textbook. Now, I have taken just this one sentence simply because we are doing word meanings. Now look at the question. Which of the following best summarizes the paradox mentioned in, let's assume it is line 30. So I'll just put line 30 here. It can be line 1, it can be line 2. Now it doesn't matter what line, whether it is the first line, last line, whether it is taken from somewhere in between. Like I told you earlier also, it is not about the entire passage, but about our interpretation of that particular word. Now in this case, what are we trying to interpret? We are trying to interpret the word paradox. Look at the context of the sentence. When we look at the context of the sentence, what is this sentence talking about? It is talking about physics. It is talking about basic physics textbook. The main or the central idea of the sentence is that it is talking about physics. What about physics is being explained? It is being explained in a very basic manner, in the sense that the contents of whatever the passage that is there is contents that can be part of basic physics textbooks. So what does that tell us? That also tells us that the passage that is given to us would also be of a very basic nature, therefore very simple to understand. But anyway, that is besides the point. Here we are trying to interpret the word paradox. In the sentence, it says, a tantalizing paradox. What is the meaning of tantalizing? Let's assume we don't know the word tantalizing, but we know the word paradox. What is the meaning of paradox? That is the question. Alright, now let's assume we don't know what paradox is. Let's see if we cannot derive an answer from our analysis of the answer options, not so much in terms of whether or not we can interpret that single word in the context of the sentence or not. Now, context, like I said, is basic physics textbook, so let us see. Teachers do not utilize educational materials effectively. Now, in this particular sentence, is there any mention about teachers? Is there any mention about their utilization of resources as such? Is the sentence here talking anything about basic physics textbook not being utilized effectively? It's only saying that there is a paradox in a physics textbook. That's it. Okay. Now, they don't utilize, this is a very, very generalized statement. How can we comment on all teachers not being able to utilize? Because when we say teachers don't utilize educational materials, we are saying all teachers do not utilize. Now that kind of overgeneralization is something that will not work. Now if you are looking at a primary purpose question also, answer options like this are dead giveaways. They are giveaways simply because they are overgeneralizations. Overgeneralizations can never test you on the particular passage that is given, because first of all, the passage is very condensed, the passage is very short, so the kind of focus that it will have is very narrow, and the narrow focus becomes even more narrow when you are trying to interpret individual words or individual phrases or line references. So this kind of overgeneralization does not at all focus on one particular interpretation. It kind of covers the entire spectrum of teachers. So this doesn't work at all. Now you might ask the question, how do I know if the rest of the passage is not talking about teachers and educational materials as such? That might be the case. Maybe the passage is talking about educational materials. Maybe the passage is talking about teachers. But this kind of overgeneralized statement that teachers don't utilize, that means we are in essence saying that teachers never utilize educational materials effectively. You and I know that that can't be true, whether it is in the context or in generality, especially for the SAT or any of these competitive exam comprehensions. When you're given answers, the right answer will never focus on such kind of overgeneralities. A law of physics appears to be violated. Now let's assume that we do not know what violate is. Let's just assume that. But this is talking about basic physics textbook. This is also talking about physics at a very, very superficial level. We are not yet looking at the meaning at all. At a very superficial level, we do not know if this can be an answer. So we keep this as an option. Let's look at option C. Scientists continue to test hypotheses that they suspect are false. Now, scientists continue to test hypotheses. Maybe they continue to test hypotheses. Perhaps that is true. But look at this particular sentence that is given. What is the objective? The objective is to identify only this word, paradox. What is the difficulty we have? The difficulty we have is that we do not know this word. Or at least let's assume that we do not know the exact meaning or the right meaning of paradox. So then, how do we know whether this is a particular answer? Because in this particular thing, we are talking about probably the contents of a physics textbook, but we are not talking about what scientists are doing or not doing. Whether they are continuing to test hypotheses that they suspect are false or inaccurate. Does this sentence say anything about accuracy or inaccuracy? Nothing like that. Now you might say, maybe in a later sentence or the sentence before this particular sentence, there is a mention of some kind of accuracy or inaccuracy. That might as well be the case. That may be the case, but remember what I told you. We do not have to interpret what comes after. We only have to interpret that word in the context of this sentence. Sometimes knowing too much about the contents of the passage can interfere with our interpretation of what could be the right answer. So here, since we are not talking about scientists, since we are not talking about testing hypotheses, and since we are not saying whether the contents of the textbook are false or inaccurate, we kind of eliminate this from among our answer options. We can revisit this when we don't find a new answer. One scientist's theory is incorrect. Okay, one particular scientist's theory? Do you think one particular scientist's theory could be the content of every basic physics textbook? Perhaps not. So this is again something that is very, very irrelevant and illogical. How can we say one scientist's theory is incorrect and say that this one scientist's theory could be the basis for every physics textbook? Because here the context is every physics textbook. So every basic physics textbook, if you keep this as a context, one scientist's theory is probably something that is very, very stretched in terms of its logic. So this cannot be the answer. Option E, very lengthy one. Generally what happens is when the answer option is very lengthy, we tend to think that okay, there must be some kind of a clue hidden for my answer, or there must be some catch in the answer, so this must be the right answer. Very often there are students who do not understand the entire sentence as such. Okay, now let's take a look at this. Scientists are increasingly reluctant to explore new realms in nuclear physics. What are we doing here? We are talking about nuclear physics. Is this sentence anything about nuclear physics? So even if we do not know whether the entire passage is about nuclear physics or not, what does this sentence say? This sentence says every basic physics textbook. So in every basic physics textbook, do you think that we can have some relevance to nuclear physics as such? Probably not, or definitely not. So this would again be something that is very, very stretched as an answer. It is very stretched as an answer because though the latter part of the answer, the second part of the answer appears to be narrowing its focus, but it's not really narrowing its focus simply because it's touching on nuclear physics. Now, we can say, nuclear physics is a very narrow field. It is a restriction of physics as such. But no, that is not the context here. That is not the context of the sentence that is established for us. So this also can be eliminated. So whether or not, in this case, we know the word paradox or not, whether or not we know the word violate, we have still been able to come up with an answer which appears to be appropriate given the context of the sentence. Now you might say that, this is a very easy question, but there would be some of us who have difficulty in interpreting words. The effort here is to show you that it's not always necessary to know every word in the question. It's not always necessary to know every word of the answer. But still, if you bring down the focus of the sentences, it becomes much easier for you if you start thinking in terms of, is this answer option something that is dealing with the context of the sentence that is given? Is this answer option too very general? Is this answer option something that is very, very narrow in its focus? Is this answer option talking about something that cannot be at all inferred from the reference line that is given? When you start thinking along these lines, it becomes very easy for us to come up with an answer that is appropriate given the solutions that we have here. Now, law of physics appears to be violated. Appears to be, not definitely is. Appears to be is maybe perhaps. So therefore, tantalizing paradox, something that is teasing. So appears to be, maybe, perhaps, appears to be violated. Violated is something that is going against the grain of whatever is mentioned in every basic physics textbook. So in every basic physics textbook, there is a kind of opposition of logic as such, and that's why we say there is a tantalizing paradox. But we cannot very clearly say that there is definitely some kind of opposition, and that's the reason why he's using the word tantalizing. And therefore, the language that is used in the correct answer option is also appropriate. Alright, so interpretation of words in this particular session was to see whether you can interpret a particular word if you do not know the meaning of that particular word. Hope this helps you in narrowing down the focus of your answers and at arriving at the correct answer.